Hey gang, welcome back to a Script Heroes bonus episode. Today we are coming at you with our full breakdown of the first two volumes of Local Man.
I can't
Local
hold up all
Man,
the
of
issues.
course, no. Of course, created by Tim Seeley and Tony Fleecs. They've worked together on this book wonderfully. They're both the writers and the artists on it, with Tim Seeley taking care of the flip book side, with the third gen books, and Tony Fleecs is doing the art for the Farmington side. Tim Seeley's colorist is Felipe Sobrero, and Tony Fleecs' colorist is Brad Simpson. Now we're running through both of the current volumes of this so that we can add it to our pull list.
But not the couple issues that have come since.
We can add it to.
So not Bad Girls and not issue 10, right?
Or issue 25.
Yeah. I think 11. I think 11, 12, and then 25 come. I think 25 is like essentially the next one shot.
Gotcha.
Like Bad Girls or
that makes sense. To give you a quick rundown of Volume 1. Once the star recruit of the media sensation super team 3rd Gen, Jack Xaver has it all. But when controversy sends Crossjack crawling back to his mom and dad's basement in the Midwest, Jack struggles to fit into a world he left far behind. And then the bodies start piling up. Throughout that volume, we see Crossjack dealing with a superhero conspiracy theory, as he also attempts to navigate copyright infringement problems with his former team. We see him reconnect with people from his hometown and his old life and come to terms with the fact that he's kind of an asshole. Then in Volume 2 is the dry season. Jack Xaver, Farmington's very own local man, is called to investigate a mysterious drowning on dry land. The problem is, Jack isn't legally allowed to be a superhero. Oh, also, he's sleeping with the police chief's wife. And there's a conspiracy theory gaining traction that Jack murdered America's most beloved champion, the Camo Crusader. Now, Local Man, already in over his head, is drawn into another twisted case with dark ties to his superhero past. So in that first volume, we get kind of our new origin story for this superhero.
I'm glad you put it that way, because that's really what it is.
It really is. Into this new phase of his life. And then in the second one, we get a more kind of like, regular superhero arc where it's like there is a problem, a mystery to be solved, and we follow him along that mystery. And there's a bit of a mystery in the first one, but it's more focused on characterization, I would say, and like character vibes. Not that the second one isn't, but that is our kind of street view catch up for you of all that has happened in the first two volumes of Local Man. I guess that's more of an aerial view. Not quite detailed enough for a street view, but Jay.
Yeah.
I was very excited when you pitched this to me because you can't really see it, but I've got my Compendium of Grace in there and my Nightwing Rebirth compendium as well. I quite like Tim Seeley's work.
Me too.
I think he's a wonderful lad. We gushed about him when we talked about Hack Slash in our Hack Slash bonus episode, which you should definitely check out because Hack Slash was awesome.
It'll be linked.
Yeah, so you had been picking up Local Man, even though you hadn't been catching up on it.
No, because I read Local Man Gold, which, interestingly enough, is maybe the most like different book once reading the whole thing. But I picked up Local Man Gold because I wanted to see Battle Pope, because I knew Battle Pope was in it for his like
you know what? Shout out to our Battle Pope bonus episode as well.
Yeah. Yes. So I had picked that up and I went, this is pretty fun. I like this. It was, kind of the 90s fun that I enjoyed, but with a little bit more of a heartfelt twist. So I was like, because you got like the Mother's Day story in Local Man Gold, and I'm sure we'll get to that. So I was like, this seems like it could be what I like about the 90s with like what I like about the modern books. And I did not realize how true that was going to be in the format that it is delivered in. And like, so because essentially it's a flip book, and I will quickly demonstrate with my crinkling that Katie will hate.
Yes,
I will quickly demonstrate.
my
you
favorite
have
thing.
One cover that leads you to the third gen 90s-esque story that's going to give you like his time when he was a superhero, which is super 90s inspired, and using like the 90s as like an interpretation of like the golden age of being a comic book hero is really cool because it fits really well. And then you flip it, another cover, and you get the main story, which has a much more modern comic book style and tells the story of him after he's kind of fallen from grace and he needs to figure out, like Katie said, it's like a new origin to figure out how he can be a hero or really just a better person again, and like reconnect
guy
with his family and his parents and his town. And like, I don't know, that just ticks so many boxes for me because it's like 90s fun, but because that's the shorter like backstory stuff, we don't get as much of it, and it doesn't really overstay its welcome. And then like modern storytelling, for this intricate, more gray, interesting story. And it's also past and present flashback storytelling, 2 story arcs, which is one of my favorite things in comics that I talk about all the time. I love a flashback. So it's got so many of those ingredients that I enjoy, and it's just, I said this before, but I really want to touch on it. Like, it is so interesting to use 90s superheroes as like, this is how I felt when I was like a celebrity superhero. And then modern comics is like, this is the reality of life. So like, that is just such a cool juxtaposition and cool storytelling device. And they use a lot of the like 90s image stuff, like Local Man Gold being the first one shot is a little nod at Deathmate, which if you don't know about Deathmate, go watch like who has a good video on Deathmate, Jerk Comics. Go watch Jerk Comics video on Deathmate. It is such a wild ride of like what happened in real life to make Deathmate, but it is the peak of like 90s-ism, extreme comics. And like doing stuff like that, and then they have a Bad Girls, is the next one shot that we're not at yet, which is, Bad Girls comics were big at that time. And then like they're doing Local Man 25, which is like kind of they did 25 image books in back in the day as like future so it's just they play with all those 90s tropes in a loving way, because if you listen to any of the letters in the back, they love 90s comics, but it's loving, but it also helps them to tell a story.
And they're published through Image, so they're even using the actual characters. Like Shadowhawk is there. We got cameos from a bunch of heroes in Local Man Gold.
They mentioned Wildcats with like an even like note to go read certain issues of Wildcats at one point,
right? Which was so cute. It's so fun because that the Image people are like on board with this, and it's like, I don't even want to say that it's really a critique of them, but it is like almost a parody of them in these third gen sections of it, but it's done with such love and such like reverence that it's really fun on its own, as well as a part of the like grander, more dramatic and tragic story.
Yeah, fully agreed. It's such a cool like thing, because it's essentially feels like it's placed within, or not even, it is because it's talking about Wildcats 1 through 3 happening at the same time. So it is literally placed within the like golden era, or like the beginning era Image Comics titles. Like, it's not it's not like they took Spawn and Savage Dragon, the titles that were still going, and went, okay, we'll be where you are and we'll exist in this part of the Image universe. It's like, no, we're going back to the beginning when you had all these books like Wildcats, like Shadowhawk, like the Max, like all of this. Shout out Boof, who I think is supposed to be a Max like type,
right? That's the vibe I got from him.
Yeah, I do believe that's the case. So shout out Boof, and like all this cool stuff that it's just like existing in that beginning era of Image, which is really cool because that stuff's cool, but then you get the things that I love about modern comics with it too. And it's an ongoing, which is one of the best things that you can take from 90s comics, is actually making an ongoing.
And it is written as an ongoing, which is so nice. That was one of my big flowers for it, is that even though, you have the like 5-issue pack that is our volume 1, and then 5 issues that's volume 2, it doesn't feel like they're divorced from each other in any way.
No.
It doesn't feel like you it doesn't feel like you have two separate stories, but it also doesn't feel like you need the previous arc to understand. Like, it feels like something that you can jump into, which is a boon of an ongoing.
Yeah. I mean, I jumped into it with Lookman Gold, and I didn't feel lost at all reading that issue. Obviously, now backtracking, there's so much more to get when you get there, but I think you're right. And I think it's not even just
an arc. That's going to be the case with so many ongoings.
Yeah. I think a lot of the issues are fairly approachable as well. Like I'm sure some of them you'd be missing context. Like I can't think of where every single issue began and ended right now compared to the previous one, but I felt like most of the issues had, you know, like a traditional ongoing type story where it's like, yeah, it's not a full story, but it's definitely its own chunk that like tells you what you need to know and like really kind of places you in this. They do a good job of saying people's names at the start of a new issue, you know, like Inga will pop out and it'll be like, it's Inga, you know, what's the police chief's name? I can't remember his name right now. Right, yeah. So they'll be like, it's Ryan, and they'll say his full name. It's Ryan, whatever the last name. They do a good job with that kind of stuff that just makes it feel like you're not missing out if you pick up a new issue. And also, like, at least for the first arc, I very much feel like you can read either half first, because I think you're supposed to read the main halves first, but I was reading the third gen ones first for the first arc, because that's how I read the first issue, and I was like, well, not going back now. That's how I'm going to do it. The second arc, there's a little bit of a spoiler when you get to, I think, the last issue of that arc, if you're reading the back first. So that didn't work out great, but I thought it was actually a really cool experience for the first arc, because I got stuff like seeing, what's the religious hero's name?
Camo. It's Camo.
So I got to see I got to see like them crashed on that space planet, and then him like offering his wife to Crossjack before the scene of him like hinting that he was okay with it when they were like having their big confrontation. And I thought that was actually really cool, because I knew what they were talking about in that scene, rather than, I'm sure when you read it for the first time, you were like, what? He was kind of okay with that, and then you read the back and you find out. So yeah, I quite liked reading it that way for the first arc, at least. I thought that was a cool way to read it, because I got the past before the present. You know, it wasn't a flashback. It was a, you know, kind of more normal thing. I don't know. That's how I read it.
That's super cool. No, I love that so much. And I think that does speak to how congruous the two flip sides of it are, that you can read it in either order. And it still works. It still has that kind of dramatic payoff and stuff. I think that this...
But a different experience, I assume, either way.
A different experience, which is really cool. Sure, yeah.
But there's like two different ways to experience this book.
Which is so neat.
I think that's neat.
It's incredibly neat. And I think that's... If you're going to do a flip book, that should be the case, in my opinion. Like, it should be doing it with a purpose. There should be a reason that you have to physically turn the book around to start it again. But yeah, just in terms of the... we've been talking a lot about the kind of form and structure of the book.
It's so freaking cool!
It is so freaking cool, but I want to pivot because I also love the story of the book. Like,
oh yeah,
it is so good. I think many times on the pod have expressed my general dislike of a kind of like evil Superman type character. And even though Camo doesn't go like fully into that territory, like he's not even like
he's not a Superman
evil
analog either, you know, like he's not like, they don't dress him up like Superman, or like, you know, he doesn't really have the powers of Superman. Like,
that's kind of what I'm saying. He's close to it. Like, it's like kind of framed as like the most powerful man in the world, whatever. The head of the superhero team is actually evil. It worked so well here. Partially, I think, because it was a very fresh take on it. It's not that he's like completely immortal or anything. It's that he's just got kind of almost the social power of Superman. Like, he was able to make it so that Jack wasn't allowed to be Crossjack anymore. And like, he has all this stuff going on, and we see him taking this like head of the superhero's role And that being a corrupted influence was very, very rad to see, especially with the way that he was doing it. He had such a wild arc. Like, he goes from, you kind of read through and it's like, all right, he's like kind of this. My one gripe with him is that they lean very hard into the religious imagery, which is like, okay, I feel like we're leaning very hard into this. Like,
I
you
agree.
know that he's evil because he's like super religious. Like, okay, it was
I'm definitely burnt out on that
with
stuff.
him. Yeah.
Agreed. That's one of those things that I've kind of gotten tired of in comics.
Yeah, that was
like
a
it's
little
so common now to have the
dramatic. But other than that, so you kind of get that's kind of the shorthand, I think, for, hey, this character is actually going to be evil. That and the fact that he kicked our main character off of his superhero team. But Jack wasn't shown to be like a good guy. So it's like, okay, maybe there was a reason. But like you said, the twist that he, because we get the sense from the beginning that he was kicked off of the superhero team because he was sleeping with Camo's wife.
Neon.
Neon. And the big reveal of, oh no, he offered Jack to Neon because he like his super serum makes it so he can't get hard or something. Local Man, very sexually explicit book, which I knew going in because
randomly
the first thing
too, though it'll go like entire issues with nothing, and then it's just like right? Here's the dick.
And then it's like, oh, that's a full dick pic. Because that was my first experience, but it was Tim Seeley, knowing how fucking funny he is, was posting on his Instagram this panel exchange that's a text message between characters, and one of them sends like a picture of a donut, and the other one is tripping balls and thinks it's an asshole. So he sends a picture of his junk, and I'm just like, Jay, should we do this for a strange Saturday? I don't know anything else about it, but this is the panels I've seen.
I luckily had read an issue, and I was like, it's definitely not Strange Saturday material.
No, and he was quite literally tripping balls, so like it makes sense why that was a little weird. But we learn that he is like, no, my wife needs to be sexually satisfied and possibly impregnated. Please bone my wife for me. And then we get this. Can I just
elaborate? Oh yeah. Oh no, unless you're gonna go into it here. But like, are you gonna talk about like the God Jesus angle?
Yeah, this really neat thing from that where he goes, I thought that I was like put on Earth as like kind of a second Jesus of sorts. Certainly not a second coming though. But Jay didn't like my joke. That's fine. You, dear listeners, definitely did, right? Jay is shaking his head. But he's like, yeah, I was put on this Earth. I thought that it was because I'm supposed to like be this Jesus figure, this savior for the world, but maybe as literally he's like training Crossjack and having Crossjack bone his wife, he's like, actually, I am the father, and Crossjack is supposed to be this Jesus figure. And then it's not just Crossjack, because we get this sense that he's then trying to like progenerate superpowers to just all of his quote unquote children as he creates these superheroes. The plan doesn't go according
I don't think
to plan, obviously.
I don't think Crossjack, like in that scene, was meant to be. I think the idea was that the child that Crossjack was going to give to Neon was supposed to be the Jesus. Like he was God, and he was having his wife impregnated. Like he was, choosing to impregnate Neon.
I think that
with an extra.
Crossjack is in a weird space because I feel like he was kind of like that with the people whose powers he stole. So I suppose with Crossjack supposedly passing his powers down, that works in the same kind of way where he's like creating superheroes, and it worked so well. It was so cool, and it was such a good like in character and deeply like original motivation. I think like most people are like, I don't know, it was so cool, it was so unique. And the fact that it was like this big reveal that worked so well within the greater arc of the book, phenomenal. Chef's kiss. And then he dies, which is a bit of a bummer.
And then he dies. Cool. I want, let's do if I mean, let's I think say anything else we want to say about volume 1. Then I want to talk about gold before we go into really volume 2 here.
Okay. Anything else about
So
volume 1? Anything else about volume 1?
I think it has the strongest
it's
overarching arc throughout them. I
it
really
does.
like
I
you
will
said,
say
his
there is a dog,
yeah.
and Tim
There
Seeley
is,
gave
and
me a
it's
bit
an
of a
immortal
scare.
dog.
Exactly. This dog is my favorite character. We love Pepper in
Because
this
it's
house.
immortal. Who just follows
Here's
the hero around.
It's phenomenal. And then he's just like, well, I can't stop this from happening. So he just starts carrying Pepper around. It is so funny.
Oh, and
that dog is
the
dynamic
dynamic with because one of the best things that kind of the dog is constantly doing is hitching a ride on this Uber, which is the only Uber driver in their shitty little town who hates Crossjack. And that's like this recurring theme is him taking this
so
Uber
good.
and then him getting out and the guy just saying, fuck Crossjack.
Fuck Crossjack.
Because that was like the big thing when he comes home, like everybody in his town is like, fuck Crossjack, which like I get for the vibe of the story. I still think it's a little weird how much everyone in the town hates him. Like, because essentially he boned this hero's wife and got kicked out of the team. Like, I don't know. I don't think that, like, if a celebrity became, like, disgraced and came back to their hometown would hate them. I've seen celebrities that have done some crazy shit, and their hometown's, like, the one place that still loves them, you know?
I think part of it is also that ends up getting touched on more in Arc 2 is that everyone expected him to go off and do great things and then make great things happen for their town, and their town just kept getting worse and worse. So I think that they already probably didn't like him. But then when he then was disgraced, it's like, oh, our kind of last thing is that now nobody likes us.
Yeah,
his parents don't even like him.
Yeah. That's like, it felt a little, and I get it because it works for the vibe of the story, but it felt a little heavy-handed. They were like, everybody hates this man, and I was like, I was expecting the reveal because early on you don't get the reveal right away of what he did to get kicked out, and then it's kind of hinted at, and then you kind of get like when I was reading issue 1, I was like, he must have like royally fucked up and like almost destroyed the universe or like, you know, done something like really awful, and then it's like, he boned the hero's wife.
I mean,
and it was like
keeping in vibe with Camo being a bit heavy-handed as a kind of religious figure. We get the same thing with the town where it's like, oh, yeah, they're like incredibly religious. They don't like when you take the Lord's name in vain. So, you know, I think that has...
I didn't hate the Lord's name in vain thing as much. Like my big thing was like having Camo Crusader have like the moment that makes him pull the plug on like all the young people is that like 2 of them are gay. And I was like, how many, like, how often are we going to go to the religious people hate gay people? Well, in comic books, it's like, we do that constantly. It feels a little lame that that's the reason he's, like, pulling the plug on all of them, too. Like, only 2 of them are even gay. Like, it doesn't even, like, fully track. He's like, 2 of you are gay, so the whole project's dead. And I was like, I'm sorry.
And the thing is, there's obviously an incredibly, very real problem with the way that religious people can sometimes manifest their feelings towards gay people. But like you said, they just hit it narratively so often in comics that it's like, all right, let's go with something a little more. Like, they're gay and they do something bad and he catches them. It's like, all right, you don't need this, like, what if they, like, experimented with witchcraft or something? That feels like such a better, like, kind of...
Yes.
Like, decidedly... I don't know. The gay thing is weird, because it's like, alright, we also, like, don't really care about these characters.
Yeah. And then, like, to jump to Arc 2, because, like, just not to full... But, like, another thing that I think suffers from the same problem is they have, like, the conspiracy theorists go after... Crossjack, which felt like another heavy-hand scene, but I'm like, you are trying to like parody conspiracy theorists in real life who have no... I'm like, he's right. Like, you're treating him like he's this crazy... He's right. Like, he's correct that Crossjack killed Camo Crusader. Like, this doesn't work. Like, your parody doesn't work
your
because
parody
he's just
doesn't
right.
Work because you're making your conspiracy theorist right. What are you trying to say,
doesn't
Tim
work.
Seeley?
Like, you're just so heavy-handed with, like, he's this crazy conspiracy theorist who's, like, going on these weird sources and going off this crazy stuff. But he has the right conclusion. And you don't, like, do that as, like, a fun tongue-in-cheek, like, he has the right conclusion. Like, you know, you just kind of, like, shoot him down and go, like, no, he was crazy and wrong. And it's like, but he was right?
He was
Like, I
crazy
get that
and
he got
right.
there through a crazy way, but he was right. Like, it just doesn't work when you do it that way. But I digress. My big gripe in this book, which isn't a, like, I still enjoy the book a fuck ton, but that's my main thing, is that some of the things just come across a little heavy-handed and don't fully work narratively because of that. But I want to talk about Local Man Gold, because I have a whole thing on the time travel in Local Man Gold.
So to give a quick thing, Local Man Gold,
you talk about the issue a little bit, and then I'll do my conspiracy theory.
Essentially, like an annual of sorts, where it's like, okay, we are in between volumes. Here's a little semi-disconnected story that's still like within the canon. Jack is called to the police station because an event that he went through as a young hero is now coming to fruition, where he, as a young hero, went forward in time and like interacted with his older self, and he's like remembering that this is happening because he was the young hero at the time, so he's interacting with himself and all these other Jacks and all these other heroes, this one other Jack and all these other heroes who they're like on a world-saving mission with, which Jack already knows they're going to succeed, and he knows the things that are like going to happen, so he's able to, classic time travel thing, but we're seeing it from the perspective of the person who's already been through it once before.
Which is really cool.
Now, Jay, you seem very excited.
Yes, I am, because I was thinking about this, and like the big kind of the only thing that time travel changes is he ends up being a better son because he yelled at his younger self for never doing anything for his mom on Mother's Day, and then the nice moment at the end, which actually was really nice, and I really liked that, was like he was like, so I'm sorry, Mom, that I missed Mother's Day because I was finally going to do something for you, and she's like, what are you talking about? I got the flowers you sent, and you take me to church every single year. And it was like, oh, that's nice. He actually changed over him. But I was like, wait a minute. They did the time travel so well in this book of him being like, okay, I remember everything that happened, and this is actually how it happened, but my younger self doesn't like necessarily understand why I'm here, so he's not going to like expect to end up here because he thinks I'm here undercover or whatever, so he's not going to expect that I'm going to become a loser. So they did the time travel pretty well with like, he remembers everything, but the younger self stuff's not changed. But they do that one change. And I was like, how does that work? Because he went through it. Why was he not already a better son? And I was like, I figured it out. I figured out the time travel. It's a double loop.
He's figured
it out. Let me explain this double loop to you. It's a double loop. So on the first loop is what we saw. He is a shitty son who has went through this. So when he went through it, let me see how the best way I can explain it. So he went through the same events, except he was never told to be a better son. So he goes through, his life being a shitty son, realizes that he was a shitty son in this moment. So then when he meets his younger self, tells him, you are a shitty son. Shitty son now goes, I can't be a shitty son. So he's a good son starting at that moment. So then once he is now the future version, he doesn't tell younger self not to be a shitty son because he wasn't a shitty son. But now because younger self isn't told not to be a shitty son, he goes on to be a shitty son. So then the double loop just keeps going.
You cracked it wide open. You cracked it wide open.
Don't tell me that doesn't make sense.
It does. It does make sense. Your passion is just so amazing for this. Look, it makes so much sense. You're so right. It's a double loop.
I'm sorry. I was thinking about that. And I was like, I think I have it. I think I figured out how it works. But I guess the question
becomes, is it just like Schrodinger's son then? Because like, at what point
it's a closed
then...
loop. It's a closed loop. You've heard of like closed loops in time travel where the thing only happens because of you, and it's like that closed. It's a closed loop. It's a closed double loop actually, but it's a closed loop just double. I took the closed loop time travel concept and just doubled it, and now it's a double closed loop. So they're connected. So it's like a double figure eight actually because they're connected loops. So it's a double figure. It's a closed double. It's a closed figure eight.
So my question would be, does that mean that he is a good son? Like, are we now dealing with alternate timelines?
I mean, essentially, yes, but also no. Because it's closed in the sense of they both end up at kind of the same point, because either way, he is either already a good son, and that, or he corrects it in this thing. So going forward from this moment is always good. It's just how we get there.
Right, but I guess the question is, does that mean that in the past he has taken his mother to church on Mother's Day?
Yes.
Because, like, are there not two divergent timelines now? One where he
No,
was a
this is a
bad
figure
son,
eight.
and one
It's
where
a
he was
figure eight. It's closed. It's closed. It's closed. It reconnects. It's closed.
closed. It's closed. Okay. Wonderful. What a beautiful sentiment. But it was such a wonderful one shot, and it was so nice.
It is. It's very cool.
Like the emotional
and you
conclusion
get
at the end.
J-Dog in there, which makes it
We sure
infinitely
do.
better.
And Cassie Hack. Did you see
We get a
Cassie's
lot
in
of
the like big group?
Yeah. Then like on the main team, they also have like that a current image. I don't know if current anymore. He had a book like a year or two ago, like Fire Starter, whatever, like the flame dude with like the wing. Like that's a dude. There's a few image characters that I recognized in like both the like
most of them I just recognized
with.
from look, as opposed to like, oh, I know who that is. I'm just like, oh, that's a person. But I recognize Cassie.
Yeah.
Because we love Cassie Hack in this house. Yeah, so Wanted Man Gold, Local Man Gold, very, very good, very, very fun. But that leads us into Volume 2.
Arc 2?
Do you want to run us through the plot on Arc 2?
Yeah, okay. So firstly, the thing to note here, just because I can cover it quicker, is on the flipbook side, we still usually start with like a one page of the third gen, or third gen, right? That's what they're called.
Third gen,
yeah. Third gen. But then we go into like this more black and white style. It was black and white, right?
Almost like webcomic style.
Yeah, origin of what happened to Inga, who was Crush Jack's like girlfriend, who he abandoned when he kind of joined this team. So we kind of see how she becomes essentially a villain. I think they call her a bad girl, or like the bad guy.
A bad guy, what they call it, which is super fun because in her first one, it ends with like this super stylized panel. Again, very like kind of zany, like homemade comic style of Inga is the good guy as she realizes that she doesn't have to like rely on a superhero to come save the town.
Yeah.
And then at the very end, we get one when we've learned that she's like become a villain. It's Inga is the bad guy. It was so. I loved those little Inga comics.
Yeah. I agree. I thought they were really well done because they were like so much internality on like how she gets there, and then like you said, she has the realization at the end of the first issue, which is I can be a good guy without Crossjack, and then the realization at like the end of the fourth issue, which is issue 9, I believe, of this arc, which is like everybody kind of sucks. The only way to succeed is to also suck, so I might as well just fend for myself and I'll be a bad guy now. So it's such a cool parallel of how she got there. And we get to see her interact with I think it's Camo Crusader now, as I'm actually remembering his name, I believe. So we actually get to see her interact with Camo Crusader, which lets him still be a part of the book once he's like deceased in the main line of the book, which is really cool because he's obviously an important character of the book. And seeing this, like, because we don't get to see a ton of like the evil version of him in the first arc, because he's kind of revealed to be that and then dies almost immediately. So getting to see the more evil version of him in more like full in the flip book side was really, really cool. It does have that in the last issue where Jack himself like continues walking through the book, and that continues even when
we'll get to that beautiful side. Sequence of him
which was the one that's the one time where I was like, reading the back half was a mistake first, because I was like, why is he just here? How does this work in the flip? I'm like, I'm not quite understanding how he's working here. And then I saw it literally goes through like the letters page and stuff and continues, and I was like,
we'll jump over to that if you want to finish our
but yeah. So sorry, the main arc is a little bit less full of an arc, I feel like, than the first arc, which is why I like the first arc from the front or the main side a little bit better, because this doesn't feel completely full. He's investigating. He goes to these like crazy hippies. I don't remember exactly what they're called, but there's some sort of hippie group.
I think they call them
hippies. Love on it. Yeah, so there's like hippie group, and he goes to like investigate them because somebody died of, like you mentioned this earlier, but they were drowned, but they were on dry land, which is like
Mhm.
weird. So he goes to investigate that, and then they give him, like, is it acid they give him something, and he starts
They use
tripping
some long
balls.
chemical name that I don't know.
Yeah, so they give him something so that he'll leave them alone. He starts tripping balls, which leads him to do some dumb shit. But he kind of continues his investigation through this to learn that essentially somebody has bought this warehouse where they were doing all of this, like, experimenting stuff that kind of lined up with what Camo Crusader was doing, and at the same time we kind of see Inga doing shady stuff, and Inga ends up creating this, like, she uses, like, the human lube man's powers on this her assistant or whatever, who wasn't originally her assistant, somebody who worked literally at her bakery, who she has now turned
Yeah.
into, like, a superhero who can light themselves on fire. And she's, like, trying to sell that, like, that ability to make powers off. And so Crosstrack finds out about this, but because he's tripping balls so bad, when he's trying to reveal this to the police chief, he also reveals that he slept with the police chief's wife, which leads to him
Who
being
is
thrown in
Inga?
jail, which is not legal, by the way.
Well,
Anyway, so he ends up in jail. He has
yeah.
to get out. Yeah. So basically, he gets out and he's gonna go after Inga, but then there's, like, this horrible flood that he has to stop. Instead, he saves the people from the flood, but Inga gets away. The police captain, chief, whatever, reveals to the world that he's the one who killed Camo Crusader, and that's kind of the note that we end on. But
Yeah, I think the
yeah,
kind of important point that you're missing is that the flood is connected to the drowning death. It's this person who is a part of fourth gen, which was the kind of
right, who
like
they, like, brought
young Avengers to
weirdly
third
back.
gen.
Yeah,
And
fourth
that's
gen.
the team that Jack was supposed to be on, but then he was upgraded to third gen. And these fourth gen people are the ones that Camo Crusader had, like, essentially trapped in these pods so that he could siphon their powers for people. That's how someone was committing murders in the first arc. And when the fourth gen center was kind of sold off, Inga, in her, like, quest to become a supervillain, was like, wait, I can use those. And the someone who had, like, water powers over the years has, like, leaked out of her containment cube and accidentally killed this girl and is now looking for revenge against the people who held her captive. So that's how it kind of ties into his
Yeah.
past, as mentioned. But yeah, like you said, I feel
Yep.
like the plot of this one wasn't as great as the first volume, but they do a real fun job when Jack starts tripping balls. They do something
Oh
that I
yeah.
deeply love, which is, like, interacting with the panel format on the page. Like, he's like, I have to listen to the voice in my head, and then he,
Starts
like,
grabbing
grabs his
bubbles.
speech bubble.
Yeah.
There are multiple times where he, like, bumps into the side of the panel and is like, wait, what did I just hit? And this is all kind of, like, in the name of him becoming more in tune with his powers, which I'm very curious if they're going to lean more into the, like, he is in a comic book side of that, because, like, the what he learns about his powers is essentially the vibe of, like, oh, it's not that I can't miss, it's that my powers are, like, leading me to the correct solution. And I'm wondering if that's going to have, like,
Yeah.
an overarching theme as it goes along of, like, oh, you know, I'm a comic book character, so I'm going to find the right solution. Because with the flip book format, we see him as a comic book character. There are the way that it looks in the collected editions, at least, it feels like you're picking up an in-universe comic book about him, but then it's, like, reality instead of the in-universe comic book. And I think we see
Yeah.
a couple times the comic book kind of in the universe as well. So I'm very curious about where that's going to lead. I'm not sure how I feel about it as a vibe, if it's like his superpowers
Yeah.
knowing that he's a comic book hero. Um, but I'm very
I'd
curious
rather
about what they
them not
might be
go that
building to.
way,
Like,
but we'll see.
I agree,
Yeah.
but I feel like the foundations could be being laid for that. as like a
They
literally
could be.
interacting with the comic book panel and his superpower
Yeah, it's always
becoming
interesting when they do that when they're on acid. Yeah. Like
right.
when they're like tripping
Like
balls
I
like that,
thought it
I'm
was
always like,
super
is
fun
it
and super
meant
well
to
done.
be that they are like somehow being like on, you know, drugs or whatever is making them see that they're a comic book character, or is it just that they are doing and seeing wild and crazy shit that isn't real, but to us it looks like it's real because they're in a comic book? It's always like, which side are you
What I
on?
will
Like,
say
is this
though
reality? Yeah.
is that I feel like it's a little more so than that, specifically because of what you mentioned in the flip book side. When he's tripping and investigating, he ends up like walking through the comic about Inga, like not in the comic, but like in front of it, and he's like
Yeah.
reading the comic, and that's what leads him to understand that she is the bad guy and that
Is
she
he
has
reading
done
the
this.
comic? I don't think he ever actually comments on anything that's like really in the comic. I think he's more just following the thought process that he was on. Like, I can look at it again, but I don't think he ever
Maybe,
really
and it could be a
directly
sort of
interacts with it.
interpretive thing where it's like, is he learning this because he's investigating, or is he learning this because he is reading the page? Like he's at least
Like, I got
looking
more of the
up
vibe
at
that it was
it.
more like, he's yeah, he's looking up. I got more of the vibe that he's like walking on a street or something, and like we're just seeing him in front of the thing. But um, sorry, my digital
No, you're
copy
good.
decided to die for a second.
Yeah, I'm frantically
But I'm
scrolling
like
back through my
trying.
library copy.
Because what I'll say is when I read it before having it, I did not see how anything he was saying interacted with the page. And then when I came back through having read the beginning portion, it just seemed like he was continuing his like train of thought. Um,
Like he's looking up at her
he
as he
is
goes like,
looking
"Oh, it's
up at
Inga,"
her, yes.
as
But I was
she's
thinking
making the
it
like
was more.
decision to
Oh,
do
it's
this.
issue 8, isn't it? God damn it! I'm on issue 9. It's
I think
issue 8,
so,
isn't
yeah.
it? He's looking up at it, but he
And
doesn't
like
say anything. That's yeah. So
I
my
mean,
vibe was like, they just have him like looking up, and it makes it look like he's looking at the.
as she's saying like, "Whatever you're doing here, Camo Crusader, I'm in." He's kind of looking at me like, "Oh, it's Inga," and like, what's your take
Yeah, I
on
think
like
that
the
was more
blank
playing with the
page?
format where it's like,
Which is fair. Where he's like standing on, you can see, you can't really see it when I just hold my phone up to the thing, but it's got like the kind of meta stuff of like a blank comic page for artists, where it's got like the image stuff
yeah.
and the like I don't know, it's all very, it's very trippy, which is definitely what it's supposed to be. So I think it certainly
Yeah,
operates
like the
on
oh
the
fuck it's
level
Inga though like comes
of,
like if you go like if you look at it like him looking at it, but like then the previous page doesn't make like the previous page is him going, if it's not him, he's literally starting the sentence, so it feels like it's just meant to be like a nice like parallel
I mean,
because we're
sure, but I
seeing
think
it.
that
I
it's,
don't think there's anything really to indicate that he's seeing it because he doesn't directly comment on anything, and
I would say
everything in the
that
pages
on
up
the
until that final
exact
page
page,
is him
yes.
almost
But
being.
when he literally interacts with parts of the page on his other pages. When he's like running into the side of it, it breaks the side of the page. He pulls down a speech bubble. Like he interacts with the page when he's tripping. So like I don't think it's a stretch to say that he's kind of outside of the comic here.
I don't think it's a stretch to say that. I think it's a stretch to say that he's making the conclusion based off of reading the following comic. Like that doesn't seem to be the
I
way
don't
that the
think it's that
dialogue
much of a
is leading you to
stretch.
be. It's literally like if you took everything that he says across the back comic and just stick it in the last panel of the previous comic, it makes sense. Like it makes sense as just
Yes,
a train
but
of
they
thought,
didn't do that. They put
completely
him
verbally.
on these other things.
No,
Like you said,
but I'm
breaking the
saying like
format that,
it's not like seeing the comic is changing his thought or
like,
leading
I'm
it.
not
Like he doesn't
saying
comment
that
on the
it
stuff that he's
is
seeing.
right. I'm saying that it could be right. And that the powers that he's exhibiting are starting to break the literal format of the comic. And it could be a tripping balls thing. But he's also like the nature of his power change being like, oh, I like need to listen to the voice and I know where to go and I know what to do and I know how to solve the mystery. I didn't mean for this to be a whole thing. It was more like this feels
No,
like something they
that's
could
fair.
be
I guess
laying the foundation for.
my question then would be is why does he not if he is seeing the pages on, why does he have literally no interaction with all the pages up until her comic starts? Because he's on the like letters page, has no interaction with anything on the letters page. He's on the hack slash ad. Nothing he's saying has anything
I
to
will
do with the
say
hack
those
slash
are not
ad.
in my
You know, he's
collected
on the Stray
edition.
Dogs ad.
There
You don't
are
get
no
those?
ads in the collected edition. No.
His train of thought continues like on the ads between the two books.
Hold up. Because he breaks through the panels and kind of falls out of his own story.
Yep.
And
then he's on the image letters page.
For me, it's then he's on one of these pages that is like the comic book sitting on a desk, and he has a straight.
I would indicate that the fact that they were willing to change the background and the stuff in between would indicate even more that he's not meant to be seeing what's on the background in between.
That's incredibly
Because then it's
valid.
a hack slash ad where he says, what my power tells me what's true. That's a hack slash ad. Then there's a Stray Dogs ad where he says it has to be Brian. He's crooked. Then there's another hack slash ad that's, but then why even tell me about Mackenzie
that's all
at all?
Stashed on the background of
it's
his
the normal,
comic book
and
in
then
my
the
edition.
images of Local Man page is it has to be, and then we get to the next story.
Interesting. Okay, I will acquiesce for now.
No. I mean, it's. I was trying to indicate why I didn't think that that's like what it was meant to be.
The ad thing makes a lot of sense because him breaking through directly onto a desk with a comic book of his life on it felt more impactful to me.
No, that definitely makes more sense. Whereas for me, it was just like, they're continuing it like through the rest of the comic with him while they do the rest of their stuff. That's interesting though that they would change it for the collective. Just like I get that it doesn't work as well to have like all of the like comic book individual issue stuff there. It's very interesting the way that they chose to do that. Anyway, we have
because it's also not a flip book in the collected edition, obviously. So Volume 2, I think a little less exciting than Volume 1, with the exception of
but it does some good like
those things. I think the move of flips, Inga killing his dad, phenomenal. That was so good.
Oh my god, brutal. Like
we had seen a number of kind of like indications of Inga's like level of evil. Like, oh, she held on to these super powered kids to siphon their powers. Oh, she was willing to like sleep with Jack to distract him so he wouldn't figure her out. But killing the nice old man who like helped you build your business and your success with a poisoned muffin that you hand delivered? Bonkers.
Can I like ask a question? Because maybe it's just because of the vibe of this book, and like all the stuff with sex in the first arc and that. Like, I was just waiting for the reveal that she slept with his father. Like that's what I was waiting for throughout the whole like backups where she was like, because she was like, I lost him, but then his father was there, and I like connected with him, and he was there for me, and I was like, based on the backups, the way the backups went in the last arc, I am concerned.
I am glad your concerns were not met, because Jesus fucking Christ.
I know.
Watch, we're gonna read issue 10, and it's gonna be like, by the way, they slept together. And I'll be like, well, I'll leave.
No, it's gonna be the Bad Girls one shot, because I feel like the Bad Girls one shot is certainly gonna have some of her backstory in there, and like I have a feeling it's not gonna involve Crossjack at all. Like I'd assume it's gonna be wherever she's like going, whatever she's doing. But we shall see.
But one of the really good payoffs in Volume 2 though comes from Crossjack Gold, where the Uber gets his truck hijacked by old or young Crossjack's team, and he's like, the insurance payout, I got a super cool new truck, and he starts to like Crossjack more, which is delightful because I want them to be best friends.
Was it insurance payout? I thought it was just the payment that Crossjack gave him. I thought he said the payout, because remember at the end of Gold,
he had like the
Crossjack has like a $20,000. So I assumed that's what he was referring to. I thought he just said the payout.
A huge payout. He was able to get like a super cool new truck, which very importantly
which was so funny.
Had like upgraded specs, so he was able to drive through the floodplains. It was super cute as a payoff. I was delighted. I love the
They do
Uber
a lot of cool
driver.
stuff with
I
that.
want
Side
more of
characters
him.
and recurring characters are handled so well in this, which does feel like another like good throwback to older comics where it's like,
Mhm.
the miniseries syndrome is a lot of times like side characters don't really get to do anything because you don't have enough time
Yeah.
to like have them keep popping up every now and then and get their little payoffs. But this really does that great. It's like, here's our Uber driver, and he's gonna actually end up having stuff happen for him. And then like the arch, like he's not fully a sidekick, but I feel like we get a lot of really cool stuff with Crosscheck's old
Mhm.
arch enemy, who obviously
Yes,
ends up
yeah.
being semi important to that first arc, but we get a lot of cool stuff with him that I really enjoyed.
No, I think that
But yeah,
I think that Jack has done incredibly well, but I think you're right that it's so much more important that all of the characters around him are done incredibly well. Like you said, like we both said, there's a couple instances of like heavy-handedness in terms of like the religious characters, but even in Local Man Gold, when they like go to the gas station and this woman is like, "Oh, that's a lizard person. I'm going to shoot him," and the even she is like very funny and done
yeah,
well. And it's like, okay, even when they're kind of
the
extra,
humor's done very well.
like, yeah, they're just all done so well, and it's just such a good book of characters, which is so great, which is so phenomenal, especially
Full
because
agree.
that leaks into the villains as well. Like, the villains have not missed for me in this, except for maybe the like Deliverance stabber, who was the one who was actually murdering people in the first one, and it's like he was kind of
Yeah, the
working
fact that we didn't
for
even talk about him, despite the like main villain of Arc One dying one issue before him, and him like taking over as the main villain, probably indicates that like he fell a little bit flat, but he still serves
yeah.
his role well enough.
Exactly. Yeah, he's one of the complaints that I had written down. Where I'm like, he feels like it's one of those things where what you expect is you kill the person you thought was a villain, and then a worse villain is behind him. But instead, it was we killed
Yeah.
the villain who we thought was the villain, and there was just a weaker villain behind him. It's like, all
The
right,
weird thing is like I feel like
cool.
and this is where I think you're right that the execution failed, but I think the idea was that he was a more powerful villain because he had all of the powers of those, like uh the fourth gen. So I think like the indication was he was supposed to be a more powerful villain, but they just because they got one issue with him because of the way that they built it, it just fell really flat and he didn't feel
Also,
more
I don't think we
powerful.
saw
It's
him
like in
use any
theory,
of the powers except for the teleporting ones.
I don't think we did either, but I think the indication was that he had all
Which
of them
makes
because that
no, that's
he
what
was
I'm
the
saying. Which
he
makes
was
it
the
very
Jesus.
difficult for
He
him
was
to
the
feel
Jesus
threatening.
baby created like obviously
Yes, yeah.
he didn't actually get to have his Jesus baby, but this was like the Jesus baby that he gave all the powers to. At least I think that's what it was supposed to be. But yeah, he only really used the peekaboo powers,
Yeah.
which
I think
made it
so
a little.
too.
Peekaboo's powers were cool. Don't get me wrong. I want
Yeah.
peekaboo power
Yes,
character.
yeah.
That's cool.
We love some teleportation.
Yeah, no, I
But
agree
yeah,
with you. He
super,
definitely fell
super,
flat.
super well done villains, except for that one dude.
Yeah,
Local Man is just very good. So I guess the question is,
it is.
Jay, is this going on the pull list?
Oh, I mean, if it's up to me, it absolutely is. Like, I am enjoying the hell out of this.
Me too.
I was actually so just context needed. Katie slightly pushed back our recording session for this by a day. So once that happened, I was like, I was like waiting for because I finished them very early yesterday. I was like, okay, don't read the next two issues. Don't read the next two issues. And then you pushed it back a day, and I was like, Katie, why? I want to read the next two issues. Stop it. Because I didn't want to obviously have read more than you going into the recording.
Right,
but I was like, I really want to continue reading.
Well, the good news is we have recorded now, so Jay can go and read the next two issues. And I haven't picked up my comics for the weekend, so I can grab number 10 and Bad Girls, and I can also read them in their wonderful floppy format instead of a library ebook, which, like, shout out to the library, but I just like a physical book.
And this is a book that really benefits from reading physical. I can say is I read
I'm sure
half of them physically and half of them digitally, and the digital single issues are fine. Like you don't get the nice thing of actually having it be a flip book, like it's more of a backup story. But they still work just fine. But yeah, no, physical I think is the way. Physical floppies is the way to lead Local Man. It's rare that I recommend not getting a trade, but based on what Katie has told me, I would recommend not getting Local Man trades and getting the floppies.
But again, what another instance of it just being such a good example of an ongoing.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like
good
that's
example
just
of an
another
ongoing and a good
thing
example of
where
the
it's
comic
just-
book format.
Yes, we love it. We love to see it. So Tim Seeley and Tony Fleecy's amazing job.
Yeah.
And, you know, we didn't even really touch on it. It feels like we must every single time. We love writer-artists. And they're both writer-artists. And they do a great job.
It's interesting because they are both writer-artists. They aren't both always acting as writer-artists here, which is the interesting thing. Because they're both writing everything. But obviously they're each drawing one of the flipbook sections. But also then they're co-writing. So I would love to see what the process of this looks like. Like, it's very interesting to have a co-writer. But you are both also artists and you are both also drawing a different thing. So you're both also... By the way, Tony Fleecs, I'm guessing you didn't read any of the backup letters.
No, they were not.
Tony Fleecs spoke about the fact that at one point, the backup letters are amazing, by the way. I highly recommend reading a bunch of them. But he talks about how, like, he typically has a more like stylized or cartoony, I can't remember the word he used, but like less realistic style than he wanted for this book. So he is using like photo reference and tracing for a lot of these, but like like he has people that he knows acting as like actors, and he will like, you know, pose them and then, you know, use that for the thing. And so there is an actor for the dog who unfortunately passed away at the end of volume 2. So yeah, the dog's actor did pass away, Katie.
Gang, can we appreciate the fact that this is the worst thing that Jay has ever done on this podcast? We are winding down on the episode, and the last thing he does is tell me that the immortal dog is dead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Because I wanted to tell a story about him using the photo reference, and then I remembered that the story ends with the fact that the dog died.
You know what? The story ends with the fact that the dog is immortalized in the comic. Because he's now going to be in these comic books forever.
That's true.
Which is so nice. But anyway, I think that is going to take us to an end on our discussion of Local Man. We both liked it so much. It's certainly going on the pull list. Yeah.
100%.
And when Local Man issues are coming out.
Yep. And you can start keeping up with our current polls. I don't think Local Man comes out this week, but you can start keeping up with our, you know, weekly polls on our weekly episode, along with news, interviews with creators, and us just talking about how to make comic books. With our weekly episodes every single Wednesday. The episode from this past Wednesday will be linked. We had a great interview with Reed Hinckley Barnes talking about his new Kickstarter comic, Hero of Legend. And this coming Wednesday, we will have another full episode for you guys. So, as always, we'll hopefully see you next week. Comic Geeks.